Good afternoon. It is Clearwater County Council's special council meeting for December the 21st, 2020. Just reminding all those tuning in that all public meetings are live streamed and recorded. Any verbal or written information provided may be included in public documents as per the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, FOIP 41. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 1 o'clock. Looking to adopt the agenda. Councillor Swanson. Those in favor? That is carried 7-0. That brings us up to the corporate services 3.1 operating and capital budgets for 2021.
Good afternoon, Reeve, Council, staff. It is my pleasure to present the following and attached documents as your balanced operating and capital budgets. Operating revenues of just over $53.5 million, operating expenses of $60,446,314, including amortization. Capital revenues of $4,190,834, and capital expenditures of $41,007,981. 2020 has been a challenging year to say the least, and yet when Council passed the 2020 budget in December of 2019, we knew times ahead would be, what can we say, not ideal, the magnitude of which was largely unknown. Now with 2021 fast approaching and life marching on like it doesn't realize we need to catch our breath, we are at a time when decisions need to be made for the year ahead. Past and current council knew there would be rocky times ahead, and Clearwater County is fortunately poised to weather this storm with less bumps than most. I'm not making light of the challenges we have faced or the ones yet to come. On the contrary, I'm saying we are oh so fortunate for the forward-thinking, conservative planning, and concerned individuals that made decisions in past years. Although Council has made the decision to draw on the Tax Rate Stabilization Fund this year to keep tax revenue steady for yet another year, it is the decision that keeps the best interests of Clearwater County ratepayers in mind. Thank you for making the tough decisions, and administration will do our best to provide the ratepayers of Clearwater County the services laid out in the work plans attached to your 2021 budgets.
All right. Thank you. Just looking for any opportunity here, I guess, for you to walk us through what we already have established. That might be a good start. And that way we can ask questions as we go.
So in the four-year financial plan, during council deliberations last week, the decisions were made to balance, and I guess maybe I should explain that word balance 2021 budget year, which means that the work plans and capital projects proposed for the 2021 budget have funding attached to them, and that would either be tax revenue, grants or other revenues, or draw on reserves. With the MGA, municipal governments are not allowed to carry a deficit in any given year. They need to have funding for any of the projects that they take on in any given year. So that is why reserves are so important, because if it were not for reserves, we would be looking to fund these through debt. So fortunately, Clearwater County is not in the position that they have to take on debt in 2021. All work plans and projects are being funded through tax revenue, grants, and some other revenues, interest income, that sort of thing, and transfers from reserve. So in 2021, the operating revenues proposed there are $53,502,641. And that includes a tax revenue being budgeted at no change from last year. We cannot say what the rate will be in 2022 yet because of the variations in our assessment base. The two things that are multiplied together to come up with tax revenue is the assessment base and the tax rate. So once the assessment base is known, the tax rate will be calculated to generate revenues that would be exactly the same as, well, not exactly, as close to 2021 as, or as close to 2020 as possible. And then council will make the decisions when the tax rate bylaw is brought forward in the spring as to whether rates would need to go up or down based on the assessment base. Operating expenses are $60,446,314, and that includes amortization of $20,200,000. That has increased over the previous budget year, but it was all due to things that were not included in the 2020 budget, like an RCMP costing or I should have wrote them down. My memory's failing me. Restricted funds used for operations means there's typically the majority of this is carry forwards. So what happens is if a project doesn't get completed in 2020, the tax revenue or the revenue that has been generated in the previous year gets put into a reserve specifically for those projects and is brought out of the reserve in the following year to fund those projects. So in 2021, that's $1,904,296. So the capital revenues in 2021 are $4,190,834. The majority of those are capital grants. Capital expenditures, $41,007,981. Those are outlined in the capital summary document that is attached to this agenda item. And funding, a large portion of that is the restricted funds used for tangible capital assets of $27,632,862. So what the draw on tax revenue for capital projects is $9,184,295. There is a principal payment on the loan that was taken out for the Westview Lodge construction project. I believe there's 4 years left on that loan. And the unrestricted funds designated for future use are the annual deposits made into those reserve accounts for projects on the horizon that council is anticipating either constructing or purchasing in future years. So in 2021, $5,591,382 will be going into restricted surplus for future years.
Are there any questions or comments on the four-year financial plan? Councillor Lang.
Rhonda, I missed what the amortization amount was in our operating expenses.
$20,200,000. It's the same amount that's getting added back in because it's a non-cash expense. And we use that to fund the transfers to reserve and capital projects moving forward.
Any other questions or comments with regard to the four-year financial plan? Seeing none, walk us through the capital plan summary, I guess, next.
Okay. So on the summary document, it's a 10-year plan that begins with budget from the current year for 2020. And then again, the only year that we have a balanced or funding designated to a net zero is 2021. And each of the departments have listed the types of projects that they will be, that they proposed for 2021. So Ag and Community Services is first with equipment and the engineered structures in community services. Corporate services, the largest project there is the broadband project and some equipment for information technology. Planning and development has some projects going forward in the Nordegg Discovery Center. Emergency and legislative services encompasses the CPOs and fire services. So most of that is equipment being purchased for fire services. Public Works, of course, infrastructure, although they had the smallest operating presentation, is the largest, usually the largest user of the capital funds. And they have costs in gravel road rehab, a grading project on the Beaver Flat Road, and facilities and Nordegg development projects. Public Works operations includes vehicles and equipment, bridge rehab. I think there's 5 or 6 projects in the bridge program. The airport is our half of the airport terminal building that is planned for the regional airport. Water and sewer, there's some work happening in the hamlets. And regional waste should read solid waste as moving forward. That will be Clearwater County's programs for their solid waste program.
Do we have any questions for the 10-year capital plan summarizations or comments? Seeing none, moving on to operating summary by department.
So the operating summary by department is structured, is in a new structure in 2021. This is been structured to mimic the organizational structure for department and subdepartment, and then categorized into programs that are being delivered by each of the departments. So in the beginning here, this is the revenues that are being generated for each department. So Public Works has some revenue being generated in each of those sub-departments listed there. Public Works operations is just some permitting money, shop and fleet. Utilities, gravel and maintenance is the water and sewer revenues. Solid waste has some revenues budgeted for the landfill use. Public Works infrastructure admin has some revenues forecasted there as well. Facilities is some rental income. I think the infrastructure admin actually is the permitting. Not sure what the Public Works operations revenue is there for 55,000. That's which? Oh, the airport revenues, yes. Good, thanks, Kurt. Corporate revenues includes tax revenue, interest on investments, tax penalties and nominal fees. Assessment has some grant revenue. GIS has some map sales. The
Deputy
A-
Reeve Vandermeer?
Just back up the slide a little bit, please. Yeah, I noticed under corporate revenues, the 2020 forecast, that is the expected actual at the end of the year, I believe, at 50.5.
Yeah.
So why are we losing 2.5 million in 2021?
Some of that is the estimation of uncollectible taxes still staying high, and we are forecasting that we're not going to use that whole amount in 2021, but still 2020, but 2021 is still unknown as to what we will use for uncollectible taxes. That's the majority of it. And also, any new assessments, no, that should be the same. I think there's a lower anticipated assessment base for 2021. For the assessment base for 2020, for taxes for 2021.
Perhaps Mr. Hagan can do the chair.
Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve. In addition to the items that Ron has identified, it also reflects the elimination of the well drilling equipment tax
Oh, yeah.
effective in 2021.
Thank you.
Thanks, Murray.
Just to clarify, I remember during the discussion on this that the uncollectible taxes were forecast, I thought, to be similar to 2020. But certainly we will not have the well drilling tax, but how much well drilling tax did we collect or do we expect to collect in 2020?
In 2020, we budgeted for 1.5 million, and we will be fairly close to that at the end of 2020. And of course, it's totally eliminated in 2021.
Right.
Yep.
Councillor Lang?
Rhonda, what was the amount of uncollected tax in 2020?
Well, we don't know what we're going to book as, for the allowance for uncollected yet. Currently, outstanding is just over $10 million.
And so how much do you expect to
Well,
gain from that?
Well, we're expecting to collect some of that for sure, and over the years, we have booked allowances in the previous years. So we are expecting to book probably another million of it as, in an allowance account as uncollectible. Okay.
Any other questions? Carry on.
The biggest portion of the ag service revenue is the sale of chemical and the grants, the provincial grants that are available for the Ag Service Board. Planning, that number there is the sale of lots in Nordegg. Have been higher in 19 and 20, so we've budgeted for a higher amount in 2021. And then the fire and disaster services line is the revenue from the partners involved in the programs there mostly, and some grant revenue. You move to expenses, Alana. Thank you. So again, the expenditures are broke down by department and subdepartment. First department being council and council's administration. No real change there. CAO administration, we've moved some costs from corporate services into CAO administration, trying to be more transparent about the costs that were in corporate services being identified as being part of a program. HR and health and safety staying relatively the same. Public Works operations includes the shop and fleet, utilities, gravel and maintenance, that's road maintenance, surface roads, gravel roads, solid waste, which will be Clearwater County's solid waste program. You'll see a higher expense number in the solid waste line due to the revenues now being identified up above in the revenues, and in previous years, we just put the net amount in the expense line. Operations is Nordeg related operations, and the two next programs are associated with Public Works infrastructure, which they look after the administration for Public Works and facilities. No programming or service level changes in Public Works except the solid waste. The next department is corporate services. Financial services, seeing some of those costs coming out of corporate services. You see corporate services is down, pushing some of those costs to financial services and CAO. Assessment. IT, broadband is a new program in 2021. That's the operating portion of the broadband project. GIS and communications also saw some of those costs from corporate services and seeing a second position added in the summer. Ag services and community largely stayed the same. None of their service levels or programs changed, with the exception of moving some of that, those transfers to what we would call emergency organizations, moved down into the legislative and emergencies department. So that's the transfers to the town for the RCMP admin and the school resource officer. Everything else stayed relatively the same. The change in the rec board is the requisition or the lower capital projects happening in the town rec that the county would split 50-50. It's quite a bit lower in 2021 than it was in 2020. Planning and development has a planning, municipal planning commission, which is separate from planning. Heritage, which encompasses all of Clearwater County, was previously just the Nordeg Museum. And economic development. There's a little bit of work going on out in Heritage, but other than that, the program and service level stays relatively the same. Legislative services, emergency management, fire rescue services, and peace officers. This again had a change in scope for a different agreement for fire rescue services, so the percentages have changed for the partners. And a little shifting of the cost into legislative services that were not previously there. No change in service level or programs. I think that's
Councillor Lang.
Rhonda, can you just explain again, there's been quite an increase in emergency management from 110,000 last year to almost $1 million this year?
Yeah, so that's the RCMP amount that is coming from the province, which is just over 450,000. Plus, we've moved from community services, the SRO costs and the RCMP admin costs that were previously budgeted in community services. You see they go from just over 1 million to 640,000.
Other questions or comment? Councillor Lang.
Yeah, can you explain the increase in the peace officer cost as well?
Went budgeted from 740 to a budget of 737
Yep.
from the forecast.
I'm looking at where it's 660 last year to 737 this year.
Yeah, so that's the forecast for 2020. Forecasts are down in 2020 due to some of the COVID-related things the training that couldn't happen. And I'm not sure if there's anything else. I could get Christine to come up and speak to that if you like.
Mr. Hagan.
Yes, there was a vacancy in that department as
Okay,
well
yeah.
in 2020. So the forecasted costs will come down because of that.
In the CPO department?
Yes, for a time, for part of the year.
Thanks, Murray.
Supplemental or?
Oh, no.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Well, seeing none, we'd be looking to follow staff's recommendation that council adopt the 2021 operating and capital budgets as noted below. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, I'll make the motion that council adopts the 2021 budget, operating capital budgets as presented.
Alana, could I have you put the operating revenues and expenses and capital revenues and expenses in the motion, please?
Councillor Swanson, is that considered a friendly amendment to your motion?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, Deputy Reeve Vandermeer?
Yeah, I have a couple of general comments. I have discomfort with this overall budget, primarily because of the short time in which we had to review it. We essentially received the information the morning of, I guess it was via email the night before. I really saw it first thing the morning of the 16th when we started reviewing it. So there's quite a few things in here that I do have some difficulty with, and think we really need to spend a little more time on some of them. And during our discussion, I recall one of them being on the broadband project, the project of towers between Rocky Mountain House and Nordegg. There was some discussion about that. And I think that's one area that it's quite a bit of money. It's $1.5 million. And I certainly have trouble with that as being the best approach to solving the short-term issues in Nordegg. Also, we have the route for fiber from Rocky to Olds. And we have acknowledged that we will be able to modify that program a little bit to look at it, but until we've done that, I have a lot of difficulty with that particular project. So with the sizable amount of money we're spending on broadband, I think we need to look into the month of January to look to see if we can improve these projects as currently defined. I noticed on social media that even before we've approved this budget, there was depiction of the towered program to Nordegg. That's kind of putting the cart before the horse, I believe. So I would like to see this this budget spend a little more time on it in the early part of the year. It looks like there may be enough on council to approve it, but I will not be able to approve it in its current form. I will not be able to vote for it.
Other questions, comments? Councillor Lang?
I have a question. So in the fire services, is the budget amount, is it including this fourth position that administration is hoping to fill? Okay. So I would really like to, before I vote in favor of approving the budget, I think this BEAR report has to come back to council. And I think I would like to have a workshop and some discussion with this position. There's been, come to my attention where there's been a lot of overlap into search and rescue, and that is also part of the BEAR report. And I think this council needs to have a good discussion about that position. I also, even though I was the one that was really excited about this drone, I don't like being the first in, and I'm thinking about maybe we should defer the drone program for another year, wait and see what other municipalities, how they're using it and how it's turning out. The drones can be really expensive, they can be really fragile, and I don't want to get into a program where we're experimenting and finding out that it's not going to work for us. So I'm thinking that might be something that I would like to see deferred. And I'm also questioning, I think I may be wrong on the dollar amount here, but I think it was Kurt, you can maybe help me with this. I want to say almost 200,000 for the gravel exploration program. You can nod your head if I'm right. 180,000? Okay. And my understanding is we have a 100-year supply right now. So I'm thinking that could be something, wait till we get down to an 80 or 90-year supply, but when we have enough, I don't know why we need to spend more money. So these are just some of the thoughts that kind of came to my head over the weekend, and we don't need to approve this budget today. We have lots of time. So I definitely want to wait till after our workshop with the fire.
Councillor Hoven?
Not already have a workshop about the BEAR report? So if we've already had a workshop, it's just gonna come back to council then for us to discuss? Do we need a second workshop on the BEAR report? Is that what you're asking? I'm just looking for clarification.
I'm asking for a workshop regarding the position, this fourth position with the fire department that will include the BEAR report and some search and rescue information that has come to light.
Councillor Hoven? Okay. Councillor Swanson?
Yes, Councillor Lang brought up about the gravel exploration. Actually, that involves the majority, because I was wondering about that too, and we got clarification last week in the budget, but that had to do with a lot with the permitting that is involved with our 100-year stuff, so that is an ongoing, regardless, if we're going to operate our gravel pits, I understand that had to deal with permitting as well in that particular line item.
Mr. Emmons?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. Just some additional information for council to consider in regard to the gravel exploration. It's not only just about the quantity of gravel, it's about the strategic locations as well. Without being proactive in identifying these sources and tying them up for Clearwater County's use and our ratepayers' future benefit, other organizations can stagnate these sources and deny us the opportunity as well. So it's about being proactive and keeping that 100-year in strategic locations. So.
Councillor Duncan?
On the terms of the Bear report, we've had discussion on that. The one item that came, or the one piece of the information that came that I recognized was that currently our headquarters staff are putting in a lot of overtime, the ones that are there. So if we are going to delay that, I think to me that means we need to look at service levels there, because we would have to change service levels in order to really effectively run that department. So I'm not ready at this time to do that. That is something that's going to take some time to do, to hire somebody and do that. But I don't know how much time, so that could come to fruition early in the first quarter or not. But we've been operating without that person for quite a while, and it's, like I say, it's obvious that we need that person if we're going to maintain the current service levels. In terms of having lots of time to approve this budget, I would disagree. If we do not approve this budget by the end of the year, we would have to approve an interim budget, and which basically means identify or run on last year's budget and identify anything that would have to specifically approve in terms of capital projects to move forward, just because of the timing and tenders, et cetera. So again, I would hope we would have had most of these discussions already in our budget deliberations last week.
Councillor Lang?
Yes, regarding the service levels in the fire department, that's what I want to explore. And if they truly are if a person truly is needed and is truly overtime based on the current service levels, then I'm all for filling that position. But it seems to me the service levels are expanding without council's authorization, and that is getting to the search and rescue area. For example, I'm going to give you one example, and I know many. There were a call out at Abraham Lake. There was probably about a dozen firefighters standing around on the shore doing nothing, and that was a search and rescue operation in RCMP. I don't know how many dollars. I know of another one that was quite costly. I don't have the detail of how many. All I know is there's quite a few. And it's not just the call outs for this. It's downloading. It's hours, it's dollars, it's provincial downloading, and it's the training. I've gone through the budget and I've seen some expenses for high-angle rescue courses. Why? So that's the service levels I'm questioning. This council has not improved increased service levels. We just went through the regional fire agreement, and there is nothing in there about getting fingers into the search and rescue area. So that is the area I want to explore, and I have concerns about, and so do many of our ratepayers.
Councillor Duncan?
So, and I'm not going from notes here, just on memory, but we did have some explanation on high angles, and I don't know if Christine can speak to that at all or not, but there are some rescues the fire department would do along roads that would not involve search and rescue. We have also been informed that our headquarters staff is looking at an MOU with search and rescue and exploring all those questions that you're asking about, and that I would hope would resolve some of those issues as well. We've also had the explanation of with the way dispatch works, which search and rescue cannot be dispatched from 911, and we have no control over that. It is an unknown at some points who's going to respond and who is responding, and we do have personnel that are cross-trained. I would suspect, and again, I'm sorry I do not have numbers, but that the amount of dollars we're spending on, and this is not including the training, so I would agree that if there's lots of training going on for that could be a significant cost, but the amount of dollars that could be expended if there's duplication, for instance, firefighters and search and rescue both responding, is not going to be a significant amount in the budget, and I'm willing to try and deal with that through the MOU in the coming year as opposed to, sort of stopping this process at the current time.
Councillor Lang?
You're right, there's a problem with the 911. But I have learned that fire just needs to phone one number and a call goes to all the search and rescue personnel, and that is not always happening. So it's very easy to reach search and rescue. As far as the numbers, based on what Christine gave us last week, 45 calls, just say each call's a minimum of 6 hours, say 6 firefighters responding at $20 an hour, that comes to over $30,000. And I think I've been very low on this, and you factor in the costs of the training. I may be wrong on this, but my understanding is to train one person for high angles, $10,000. And it depends on, there's different levels of training. The ropes, the hats, the gear, that's very pricey. And it's continuous training, it's continuous upgrading year after year after year. Why are we getting into that? We need to have this discussion, and our fire department needs to meet with search and rescue so we can make some educated decisions on what we're going to do moving forward. They have not met. There's a lot of serious concerns there behind the scenes that I don't think this council fully knows about.
Mr. Emmons, perhaps there's an opportunity here to flag this particular concerns and have a further discussion in January, February, which then would allow us to move forward with the budget today in principle and still have the conversation early in the first quarter of 2021. Is that a possibility from an administrative side?
It is. Reeve-Laird. Administration's been talking about it. If council's uncomfortable at this time going forward, we're prepared to bring information forward and have a workshop or a different setting for council to have a conversation openly with administration and see if we can research this out.
Yes, I believe we're looking for an opportunity here to have a more thorough discussion about some of the concerns without holding up the entire budget. I think that may be the way forward. Thank you for helping us with a strategy for that. Do we need a motion to that effect?
Yes, please.
Okay, we already have a motion on the table to accept the budget, and that comes with operating and capital numbers. So not to put you on the spot too much, but could you please read the motion back so we fully understand it?
Yes, thank you, Reeve-Laird. So I have Councillor Michelle Swanson motions that council adopt the 2021 operating revenues and expenses and the capital revenue and expenses budgets as presented.
Okay. Ms. Sharan, does that cover the numbers that you wanted?
Well,
or did you
I'll
want-
give Alana the numbers. that-
Okay.
Just out of the agenda item.
Okay,
And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we would pass the budget with exception and note the exceptions instead of in principle, so that the rest of the operations could move forward.
The only other outstanding question with regard to deferral of the drone, Councillor Lang, is that something you still wanted to do while there's a study that is going to be happening?
I would just like to see how the drone programs work out in other municipalities. I believe Mr. Hagan said this is brand new. And I don't see any sense in rushing in until we have some feedback and research done on how this is working with other municipalities before we dive in and start experimenting with it.
Given that, it sounds like we'll have two subsequent motions. Councillor Hoven.
You know, I will wait until we are discussing the drone specifically, not the broader motion on the table.
All right, thank you. Any other questions with the motion at hand? Everybody understand? Oh, Councillor Hoven?
In regards to the budget request from the town of Rocky Mountain House, Mr. Hagan, was there any additional information that it came in? Because the report that we had received, I believe, had some inaccuracies in it. So has any other information come in to clarify those numbers?
Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve. No additional information's come in to my knowledge, Councillor Hoven. But what I would suggest is that despite the numbers that are included in the budget, administration still fully intends to do the follow-up with the town and clarify. If the changes are significant enough to warrant an adjustment to the budget, administration will bring that back for council's consideration.
Deputy Reeve Vandermeer?
Question to the chair. I mentioned two specific items. I also understand the thing about the gravel and the service level issues. Would the consideration of the two issues that I raised specifically also be subject to a notation on the budget?
Could you please repeat them?
Firstly, the discussion and full investigation of alternatives relative to the Rocky to Nordegg Tower proposal to enhance service, and the routing on the Rocky Mountain House to Caroline and Old's project.
I understand, oh, Mr. Emmons? Okay, your light was on. I understand we have notices of motion for those to come back. That should work for something to come back in January, is my understanding. Do we need any other additional notation beyond that? Just looking for clarification. Mr. Emmons?
Not unless we're adding more, Reeve Laird. We do have the notice of motions and it's administration's intent to bring those back.
Okay.
If there is additional, we would need to know that.
I'm not sure the original notice of motion looked at the actual routing of the main line from, specifically from Rocky to Racines.
Well, that was a defeated motion on December the 8th, and to bring that back, it would require one of the four who defeated the motion to bring it back, or we wait 6 months. So that is,
That one was the combination of main line plus fiber to the premise. Whereas right now, we're approving a route, and I'm suggesting that the route of the main line itself should be subject to further discussion and review. And I would request that the engineers take a look at another route in terms of its ability to affect population.
I believe staff, through that whole discussion when we did notice of motion on December the 8th, we're able to pick up on that information as we discussed it. Could I confirm that with staff, that that was part of your understanding from the notice of motion? Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve. What I can confirm today, council, is that the notices of motion that were passed at the previous council meeting and as recorded in the minutes, it's administration's intent to bring those forward to the 2 meetings in January and address those notices of motion.
Councillor Duncan?
In terms of the budget, I'll just pose this to Councillor Vandermeer. If there is no significant difference in a lot of monies, are you just specifically asking for a change in the work program? If there's unless there's significant change in the dollars, this budget could still be approved for those dollars? Would that be a reasonable explanation or a reasonable understanding of that? And then if there's changes that would be made coming in January through the notice of motion, that would be to the work programs basically and not the budget, unless you were thinking of significant changes to dollars in this program.
Deputy Reeve Vandermeer?
Yes, thank you for that request for clarification. I think the dollars within the budget are adequate, but it concerned me a bit when I saw on social media that we were building a certain number of towers to Nordegg. And that one, although there is a notice of motion affecting fiber to Nordegg, it did not talk about the towers. And that tower program also, with the money that is being proposed, I believe 1.5 million, I think this council needs to understand and consider options for that as well, not just the fibers cover it off, but if it's a tower system, that amount of money also needs to be discussed with alternatives, is what I'm looking for. So that's my concern. It's that we forge ahead doing something that commits us on a path that we haven't, in my view, fully considered the alternatives. It's not that there isn't enough money there. There's enough money.
Right. So my understanding is those discussions will take place in January. We do have a budget in front of us that you see as being enough. So we should still be able to move ahead with Councillor Swanson's motion to approve the budget. So, any other questions? Those in favor? That is 6. Those opposed? To 1. That is carried. That brings us up to item number 4. It's a closed session, so we're looking for a motion to go in camera. I would make that. Councillor Hoven? Oh, Councillor Duncan.
Did staff not require some motions for other discussion in January on the?
Yes, we did, before we go in camera. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder, Councillor Duncan.
I believe the two items were the bear report or fire service levels, you know, all those discussions we had around there, the other one being the drones. I'm not sure if Councillor Lang, if you were okay on the gravel exploration, if you wanted to talk about something there as well. I would just, if I may speak to the gravel exploration, our current policy is to maintain a 100-year supply of gravel, so we are using some gravel every year, and exploration is exploration to find those sources, or as Mr. Emmons said, to, especially in areas where we don't have much gravel and we're constantly looking for gravel. And also, we don't want to sterilize things like residential development, or, sorry, allow residential development or something along those lines to sterilize potential sources of gravel. We want to make sure we know where all those sources are out there. And I'll leave it at that for now. If you want to talk, we can talk about the drones as well.
Councillor Lang, I do apologize
no,
that I
that's right.
forgot we had additional motions.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't fully understand the motion, but the reason I voted against it was because of the drones and the fire review with SARS. Yeah, I'm okay with the gravel exploration. Mr. Emmons and Kurt did a good job of explaining that.
There was outstanding motion that you were considering with regard to workshop or to that effect for fire?
Yes, so, yes, I would like to make a motion that administration, in the new year, put on a workshop regarding fire. The position that's being asked for, and some information regarding, what's happening with, SARS. And the potential agreement between SARS and the fire department. And how the two organizations working together affect our operations and service levels within the fire department.
Alana, I hope you were able to capture that in a motion that is a little shorter. We get the gist of it. Councillor Hoven.
So I'm a little confused. You would like for us to discuss a signed MOU with SARS so we can understand what the agreement is? Or you were wanting us to direct administration on what we want in the MOU?
I want an understanding of the costs for a fire department and their involvement with the SARS operations. And how our fire department, in working with SARS, and how that is affecting our service levels over time and costs to our organization.
All right, Alana. Oh, Councillor Hoven.
So do we have to, are you wanting the fire department to have a signed MOU so we can then have accurate information to discuss the budgetary impacts? Or are you wanting the workshop before any more work continues on the MOU? I think that's a fairly important point we need to address to administration.
I think we need the workshop before the MOU because I think this MOU is going to take quite a lot of time for the two organizations to work out.
All right. Do we want to take a moment to have Ms. Hagert provide some additional clarification on this? Ms. Haggart, thank you.
Thank you, Reeve Laird, and members of council. Good afternoon. In terms of the MOU, that's a discussion, as I mentioned in an email to council last week, that Clearwater Regional Fire representatives and myself have met with the Search and Rescue Rocky Board to discuss going down the path. There's actually been an MOU draft in place since last year, and the board and ourselves have been working towards getting that draft finalized. In that draft, it goes over details that are operational and specifically things like our maintenance for their vehicles and fleet agreement, the fact that we provide insurance, some of the other ways in which Regional Fire and SAR work together. The one thing it didn't include was an operational component or standard operational guidelines. So that's the kind of extra piece we're looking to add as it stands. So I feel comfortable in the fact that we have something to begin with, and we're going to be moving towards that early on in the new year, I hope, based on that conversation that we did have a week or so ago. And certainly, I know I've already sent an ask to administration to book a workshop for that first week of January, and we can certainly answer the bulk of the questions that council may have.
Councillor Lang.
Christine, could you, with that workshop, provide us costs, the training costs, the supplies costs, high-angle rescue costs? You did provide us with the number of calls. I'm not sure if that also included the stand-down calls, or if that was just actual calls that they went to. I would like to know the number of stand-down calls, and the number of calls really don't tell us a lot, because we need to know how many men went, how many hours they were, basically their pay. I want to know the costs of what it is, and also I realize there's been some agreement in the works, but I do think I've obviously talked to some search and rescue personnel, and I think there's a long ways to go before they get an agreement. Even with the definitions there with front country and back country, what our fire department is asking for is different than the RCMP and Alberta Health Services. So until there gets to be some definitions worked out, it's going to be tough sledding, I think, for you for a while.
Sure thing, and then we can certainly provide additional call data. I mean, each call is going to vary, so even a year-over-year average might not paint a picture because every call is going to be different. So 2020 information for the workshop in January?
That would be good. And what has been spent for training and materials or supplies that's related to search and rescue? Ropes, helmets, gear,
Sure.
high-angle rescue courses.
We can definitely provide additional details in terms of the budget for which council has taken a look at already. In terms of, just to answer the question about the ropes and rescue, we certainly don't have high-angle rescue within our service level, but we do some of that training for things like embankments or slopes that are in the front country, as well as grain bin rescue. They do require ropes and harnesses for that type of rescue as well. So those are the reasons why you'd see that training within our service level. And those are service levels listed within our intermunicipal agreement that was signed back in April under Schedule B. So that is a complete holistic list of our service levels to which we train for. But itemized list of training, absolutely, we can provide that in the workshop for council as well.
Very well. So Alana, could you read back that motion, please?
Yes, thank you, Reeve. So I have Councillor Teresa Lang motions for administration to schedule a workshop to discuss the rehiring of the Regional Fire 4th position, service levels, and the draft MOU with Rocky Search and Rescue to be presented. Please correct me if I missed anything.
All right. Councillor Lang indicated that thinks that that's inclusive. Any other questions or comments with regard to the motion? Councillor Hoven?
My only concern is in terms of transparency with our residents. I'm wondering if it would be better to have a council or an agenda item prepared and have the discussion on these two items, which are both public as they are in the budget, and we can keep just open transparency with our residents instead of having a closed workshop.
Are you suggesting that this be turned from a motion to a notice of motion?
No, I don't believe so. I'm just saying, I think I'm going to vote against this because this discussion is started in the public and it needs to continue in the public and should not go behind closed doors.
Councillor Lang?
I'm fine either way. I'll leave it up to administration and what they prefer.
So did we want to change that with a friendly amendment to, from workshop to council agenda? Or are we leaving it alone? Councillor Lang?
I'm going to leave it as a workshop. There may be some not so public information that needs to come forward.
Understood. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Duncan?
Just a comment, I'm okay either way as well, but I would hesitate a bit on it being an agenda item. I think it's too long for an agenda item. I don't know how we would get it through in a council day.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Those in favor? That is 6. Those opposed? To 1. That is carried. Any other motions with regard to some of the comments? Deputy Reeve Vandermeer.
Yes, I had one, and it is that administration review and report on alternate, lower-cost wireless solutions and corresponding service levels for the Rocky to Nordegg connection prior to capital commitments.
Out of curiosity, this is for administration. Do we not have that as a notice of motion coming in January? Mr. Hagan?
I would need to review the minutes of that meeting to be sure.
Okay.
Councilor Reeve-Laird.
I just want to make sure we're not duplicating something.
I'm quite certain it is not.
Alana, were you able to capture that whole, or would you like Deputy Reeve Vandermeer to read it one more time? Oh. Well, you did far better than I did. I think it may be well worth reading one more time.
Thank you, Reeve. So I have Councillor John Vandermeer motions that administration review and report on alternate lower-cost wireless solutions and corresponding service levels for the Rocky Mountain House to Nordegg connection prior to capital commitments.
Okay. Any other questions or comments with regard to that motion? Seeing none? Those in favor? That is 4. Those opposed? 3. That is carried. All right, any other motions? Councillor Lang.
I would like to make a motion that the purchase of the drone that's been identified in the 2021 budget to be deferred for 2022.
Counselor Hoven?
I thought we just approved that in the budget. If you want, I think if there's time for further discussion on that, I guess I would be open to that, but we can't defer it till 2022. It was just approved for 2021.
Counselor Lang?
Administration to give their feedback on that. That's what I was wondering at first, and then my understanding was no, that we could come back and itemize some of these things. So maybe I'm misunderstanding things.
Mr. Emmons or Mr. Hagan?
Being that the resolution has passed today already in terms of approving the budgets for 2021, what I could suggest is if Councillor Lang would like to see this purchase deferred, I would suggest that she consider perhaps amending her motion to read that it would be an adjustment to the approved 2021 budget to remove that item.
Counselor Lang?
Okay, so that's how I will change my motion. So that approved 2021 budget that's just been approved be adjusted to remove the purchase of the drone, or to defer the drone purchase to 2022.
Counselor Swanson?
I was under the understanding, Councillor Lang, that when we have this workshop in early January, that the drone discussion would happen at that particular point in time as well, not just the fire vacancy and SAR and service levels, costs, et cetera. I thought that you had included that. I'd wrote that down on my paper, that that was part of that as well. And so therefore, I thought at that point in time, with more discussion during that workshop, that we would have more clarification on the drone program.
Counselor Duncan?
I would let Councillor Lang respond if she
Councillor
wants
Lang.
first.
I would like to have the drone, information on the drone included in that workshop, although that does not defer it from the 2021 budget. So that is why I made this motion.
Counselor Duncan?
I don't know I don't know if we have enough or have the right staff here today to maybe give us some more details, but my understanding was that, I know we've been using drones for several years now, and these are not commercial drones, they're more we call them personal drones, and they're at the end of their life. And my understanding was that staff have been pleased with what results we've got from the limited drone program we've had to date, but that if we're going to continue with it, we would have to upgrade this program to a more commercial grade type quality drone. I think part of that upgrade involves, and they have done some research already, but looking into the types of drones and what they can be used for, and what the additions that can be made to these drones in terms of attachments for the different services they can provide. So I guess at this point, I think we're moving in the right direction. I think those, as we talked about during our budget deliberations, the use of drones will overlap a number of departments here: GIS, fire, agriculture. And I am okay to move forward on this. I think I would trust staff that if the drones that are available would not provide the services we are wanting or would need in the next few years, that they would alter that program and come back to us for something different. Yes, it's gone up in price, the price is significantly higher for the commercial one versus the ones we've been using to date. but I would expect the life of those would be far superior, as well as the number of services that they can provide. I'll leave it at that for now.
Oh, Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reeve. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I think you very accurately summarized our experience with drone services within fire rescue services already. And you're correct that the drones are using today, they're experiencing breakdowns and loss of reliability in those. And in looking at the possibility of upgrading to a commercial drone, raised the question amongst us at an organizational level in terms of the expanded use that we could get out of drones overall. So this isn't a new program to Clearwater County. It's a program that has been in place for a couple of years, but it's still relatively new in the big scheme of things, but it is a growing program and an evolving program. We are starting to see opportunity to bring costs down to the organization if we can expand the use of these drones. And this one drone in particular that we included in the capital budget request would give us the opportunity to do some of that research and prove out in principle if we believe that some of these other functional purposes could be met through these commercial grade drones as well. So that was the intent this year, is to use this particular drone purchase as part of our research and fact finding to bring back to council with a recommendation as to whether to pursue the drone program organizationally further in the future or not.
I guess this question is from me, Mr. Hagan. So my understanding was exactly what you're starting to explain, that you were going to be exploring and getting more information so you could expand the drone program throughout all of the departments. What I think what we're sensing, or at least what I'm sensing council struggling with, is our not understanding what this program is and how it could potentially grow. And I see this as an opportunity to perhaps, that's another workshop down the road, so we better understand what it is that we're embarking upon and what the implications are for fire, to help train out some of these folks, that sort of thing. I think that's, for me, what the piece I'm missing, to have a sense of confidence and comfort in how this program, we just don't have the information, so it feels new and we don't really have all of the answers yet. So it sounds like that's part of the exploration. And I see you're nodding your head that that is what you're looking to do, but that is the piece I'm missing, at least. Councillor Lang.
I think Reeve Liard explained it well. What I was excited about with the drone was for GIS and replacing the planes. I guess I failed to see how the fire department people and using a drone is going to help with that. It's just too early to be buying these drones and playing with them and experimenting with them till we know exactly what they can do. I don't want to be the first in with them.
Mr. Hagan.
Councillor Lang, I can appreciate your concern for that. What I see as an opportunity is for fire service to put this drone into service immediately and fill some of the gaps that they're having in terms of their consumer grade drones now without a disruption in that service. At the same time, gives us an opportunity, and when I say us, I mean the other departments, an opportunity for some information and learning, information sharing from fire services to the rest of us as to how their experience with the drone program might be applicable to things like GIS, like you mentioned, and other areas. And for us to converse and evaluate as to whether we agree that there's opportunity there in the future, both to save money and increase efficiency overall. So it wouldn't be a matter of us getting the drone and just experimenting with it. It would be in service, but at the same time, we would look for when it's not being used in service, give us some demonstrations and answer some of our questions about its functionality.
Thank you. Mr. Emmons?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. And I guess I wouldn't mind augmenting the conversation with, this is one of the approved services within the recently new fire agreement. So it's identified in the services that's offered. And the drone program really isn't new. Drones have been around for quite a number of years. In fire particularly, the usage has been with the thermal for finding missing people. Even aerial photography and Bear Smart, looking for some of that undergrowth, has been beneficial. So for fire, they've found the benefit and use of this equipment. What administration was looking for was opportunities to augment those proven benefits outside of fire and what other uses in other departments. And I think that's the part of the conversation that's getting missed, or at least I feel it's being missed. It is an approved service that's currently offered, was accepted by this municipality and our partnering municipalities. So this was other opportunities to utilize that same equipment.
Ms. Hager?
Thank you. Actually, I was just going to say, very similar to what Mr. Emmons said, I just wanted to add to that as well, that it wouldn't be our department's intent to use fire to do things like the complete flyover that would be talked about in GIS. That certainly wasn't the intent. That we do have train the trainers, operators who are able to train other county staff members, and that would be the plan, to do that kind of one-time training and then provide the tool to be able to do those things to the other departments for their use as a centralized corporate service tool. And certainly to add to a few other ones that Mr. Hagan mentioned earlier, there's also been use already of that drone for communications, so Clearwater County Communications related to the broadband project, as well as the new Leslieville Public Services Building. And also, there's other potential uses in terms of emergency management, where we could do some pre-planning in some high-risk areas or more high-risk areas where there's multi-lot subdivisions. So we do see a use even within my own department outside of just fire rescue services. So I just wanted to pass that along as well to council.
Councillor Lang?
So is there intent to use it as a search and rescue mission to find missing people?
We would only deploy in terms of that service level when we're called by search and rescue or the RCMP. So typically, a call for a missing person would come through RCMP to search and rescue, and then search and rescue would call out us, Clearwater Regional Fire, because we have the drone, as a mutual aid partner for that search. So that wouldn't be our call first. Likely, if it was a true just missing person, it would come through to us through SAR. And that's how some of those calls were itemized when I gave that update for council in terms of those 45. There weren't 45 that were search and rescue calls. Some of those were those calls, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I apologize, but some of those calls were front country response, where we might be responding to an off-highway vehicle collision in the front country. Then there was some of those, perhaps a front country response, where we would call search and rescue as technical experts, or the unknown. So that quite often happens with fire and search and rescue calls, is we're getting a call through to dispatch and the either location isn't known or the type of the incident comes through as a motor vehicle collision, off-highway vehicle, and there's not certain the extent of the call. So there's often times where we are coming on a response where we have both organizations going until one or the other knows that they could be stood down, or often we go as partners in mutual aid for one or the other. So hopefully that explains the incident calls.
Well, I imagine we'll get more information in our workshop, and perhaps the impact of this drone learning opportunity through various avenues as well in 2021. We do have a motion on the table. Would you mind reading it back one more time? Thank you.
Thank you, Reeve. So what I captured, please correct me if I'm wrong. Councillor Teresa Lang motioned that the 2021 budget be adjusted to remove purchase of the drone and be deferred to the 2022 budget.
Any other questions or comments? Those in favor? That is 3. Those opposed? To 4. That is defeated. All right. I think, is there any other motions? Doesn't look like there is any, at least according to my notes. Looking for a motion to go in camera. Mr. Hoban, Councillor Hoban. Those in favor? That is carried 7-0. We've just concluded our discussions for in camera. There are no motions coming out of that. Folks, today's meeting marks the last council meeting for 2020. It's been a remarkable year full of challenges. I want to thank our administration for your continued efforts and your support through a difficult and challenging year. You can find today's special meeting highlights and video posted on our website. By way of reminder, our county offices will be closed between Christmas and New Year's and open again on Monday, January the 4th. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for January the 12th, 2021. We recognize that COVID-19 continues to challenge our community, and we are reminded that it is our attitudes during difficult times that defines us and creates successful outcomes. Please take appropriate precautions and stay safe. Christmas is a reminder for past tendernesses and compassion, courage for the present, and hope for the future. On behalf of County Council, we'd like to wish each and every one of you and your families a Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year. Looking for someone to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Swanson? Those in favor? That is carried 7-0. Thank you.